La fuerza de Elvira. I cast the character of my mother in Spanish because all that I understand as strong, as capable, as having principled values resides first in the 100-pound mestiza body of my mother, writes Cherríe Moraga, poet, playwright, cultural activist, but maybe first and foremost, daughter of Elvira. In her book, Native Country of the Heart, Moraga writes a memoir of her mother, and it is more than a memoir of a woman. It is a reminder of how we are all shaped. Elvira Moraga began her life in the United States, born here, living her early childhood just north of the Mexican border in the Imperial Valley. One of her early memories is of being hired out by her father at 11 years old, along with all of her school-age siblings, to pick cotton. Elvira dragging her 3-year-old brother behind on an empty sack as she went along the rows. Then it was 1929 and the stock market crashed, and anti-Mexican, anti-immigrant sentiment rose, and her family made a voluntary move back across the border to Tijuana. 1930s, Tijuana seemed like it escaped the depression from the descriptions that Cherríe Moraga gives. It was thriving. Elvira went to work as a cigarette girl in one of the most popular clubs, El Agua Caliente. Hollywood stars would show up there, frequent the clubs that were filled with glamorous people. Hearing the stories and seeing the pictures of that time, Cherríe Moraga would wonder whether that time in her mother's life made ordinary Mexican-American life later, maybe life anywhere, forever impossible to compare with. How you gonna keep them down on the farm after they've seen Tijuana in the 30s, her daughter quips. Later, Elvira would move back to the US. She would marry an Irish-American man who craved the kind of family and belonging that his wife made possible. And he would take a back seat to the life that she orchestrated. They would run his family's hotel in, I think it's Pasadena for a while, but later they would settle in the San Gabriel Valley. There they were surrounded by this vast collection of family. And Elvira would be the center that held. She was someone who could handle so much and so many in the world, Cherríe Moraga writes. In our extended familia, she served as the planet around which our near 100 relations hovered like orbiting moons. Over the years, I came to realize that what kept us all gravitating to the sphere of my mother's kitchen, aside from her incomparable chili colorado, was our shared sense of su fuerza incansable, her indefatigable strength. She was not always right, but she was always, until the last years of her life, presente. From her kitchen and home, Elvira would dispense truth and wisdom and guidance. She would tell stories. When Elvira developed Alzheimer's in her 80s, Cherríe realizes that the cost of that disease to all of them would be that her mother, the Cuentista, the storyteller, will take her stories with her. More than that, she'll take their culture, the way back to knowing and remembering who they were that Elvira seemed to offer clues for. Some of Elvira's truths came in the form of hard-won mantras or dichos, sayings to live by. There was one in particular that she offered up most. Moraga writes, Elvira raised her children and guided all those that came through the doors for counsel with a foundational set of values that can best be summed up in the phrase, no te dejes. Don't get used or taken advantage of or abused. Although not always told to me in Spanish, it was later that I learned that so much of what my mother taught her families were translations from a worldview conjured from an invaded and fractured Mexico, but one that preferred the welded tools, one that served as tools for our survival in Gringolandia. No te dejes didn't keep me from experimenting as my generation imagined itself doing during the liberation movements of the 1970s, Cherríe Moraga writes, but it did tell me when to leave the bar or the bed of a batterer. It reminded me to step away from the cruelty of gossip and learn to hold my own cruel tongue. It developed in me a fierce judge of character, one as tough on myself as others, and finally it made it very difficult to lie. It was not a happy childhood, but a true one. Truth, it would seem, was at the core of Elvira's storytelling. Truth of one's own wisdom, taken from one's own life, offered for them to use in their own. So Elvira shares her own as honestly as she can with her children, all of it. I am 9 years old, Cherríe Moraga writes. It is a Saturday chore day. I'm vacuuming the hallway. I have something to tell you, my mother says over the blast of the suction from the Kenmore. I watch the unease in her eyes and the rope that she makes of the dish towel she wrings at the waist of her apron. My heart quickens and I hit the off switch with my sandaled toe. Yeah, mija, I was married before your father. They had met during the war, she says, and that's about all she says. I'm relieved to learn that there were no other children, relieved to put a name and a story to the stranger's portrait, foreign and blonde, that I once found laying at the bottom of the red and white May Company box in the cupboard. Many years later, my mother revealed that she was the one who decided to divorce when she learned her husband had re-enlisted in the war. It was so he could have other women, she said. Too many women in too many ports is how I remember it. Stories like this will shape the girl who Moraga is into someone who takes from it that knowing your own heart and following it is central to what life asks of us. That you can live after heartbreak, after mistakes, but also that nothing is worth relinquishing the truth your heart calls you to live. It is a message that a girl who knows she is attracted to women at a very young age will very early put into practice. Imagine it is the lead up to the rite of confirmation in the Catholic Church, and Cherríe Moraga has been taught not to lie. She has been taught to honor the rules, in this case, the ones about going to confession and confessing, about being forgiven and being free of sin when you step up onto the altar on the day that you are confirmed. Looking for guidance and instruction about the feelings she has, seeking forgiveness, she goes again and again to the confession booth and receives only recrimination. "Don't come back here," the priest says. "It's your 4th confession that week. You are crazy. You need to get some help." The confessional grill slams shut before your latticed, shadowed face. You rise, push your weight against the huge oak doors, and step back out into your masquerade life. Cherríe Moraga will live the full brunt early on of what her mother's fierce lessons about life require of a person. She'll learn that this honesty extracts its pound of flesh before it blesses you. And she'll find her way through to the real wisdom and power that I imagine her mother knew always waited on the other side of such moments, as she herself had found. So it is that later in life, the daughter will haltingly tell her mother what she had risked so long ago telling the priest behind that latticed confessional booth divider. And her mother will teach her one more lesson. In the drama and the upset of hearing that her daughter is lesbian, Elvira's response is such that Cherríe is forced to say what she always feared she would have to name the Sophie's choice that truth might require of her, that this truth might require of her. "Don't make me choose, Mama," she says. "Because if I have to choose between this life and my family, I have to choose this life." And the world suddenly goes quiet. Elvira goes still, and her daughter waits. And when her mother speaks, all the fury and upset is completely gone, and she says only this: "How could you think that there is anything in this life you could do that you wouldn't be my daughter?" And that's it, Moraga says. They would endure a lot of each other's foibles and choices and the twists and turns of each other's lives. But, Moraga said, we did not lose each other by pretending we were other than who we were. And the courageous daughter can perhaps be even more courageous, and she will be in her life, standing on that truth that she stands on, that unshakable love. Plus, she now has a story she can tell that reminds her and others of that truth. So, why am I telling you about this woman and her mother on our opening Sunday? Because it's the book that's sticking with me and we have freedom of the pulpit? Because we sing a doxology, a second verse in Spanish, and do little else to name and honor the Chicano and Chicana heritage that so richly blesses our city and so many of our lives, mine included, yes. But also because the image of Elvira's kitchen with its food and the laughter and the elders talking and the advice and the storytelling and the dichos that get gathered up there that reground everybody in who they really are and how to live in this world with dignity and courage and heart, because that felt so appealing and so like what I hope this is that we do together. What it is. The feeding of each other and the telling stories and the listening for the wisdom. One person in the strategic planning notes that we gathered last spring and this summer said they thought we tell too many stories of our own history as Unitarians or Universalists or in this congregation that make us the heroes, and we need to talk more about our mistakes. Point taken. We need to tell all the stories, an honest accounting, because as we know, sometimes the best truths come out of the places where we stumbled. And someone else said they wanted to hear more reflections from our members, life passed through the fire of thought from everyone among us. As Emerson would have called it, life passed through the fire of thought. The best kind of teacher, point taken. And then to find places to share all that reflecting. And to see our own stories for what they are, which is rich offerings, anchors and north stars, but not just for us, maybe for someone else. There's a story coming in right there on the phone. Just wants to be told, can't stand it. We are, after all, storytellers, right? We're all cuentistas. And we're all people who are always and have always and had our time sitting at the feet of elders, and we've served our coffee and we've listened. We are both the tellers of the story, the listeners, holding a place, looking for something that will give us a little guidance before we head back out the doors into the world beyond them, wondering how to make something strong and gorgeous of every week of life. So what stories were you told about who you were and what you were called to be in the world? And who told them to you? And what stories have you gathered along the way already in life worth telling? And what stories do we all need to hear right now to step out into the week that confronts us and the world that faces us with our hearts intact in the midst of it? And what stories will we write this year? Come into this life together, all of us, I hope. Let us come in never pretending to be other than who we are. Come prepared to share what you know, how you came to know it, the stories and dichos that you have to offer. Come into another year of life in this familia. Amor y la fuerza incansable be ours. Blessings in this new year just begun. Amen.